Hey, it's me editing the video, and before we get started. So, when I first reserved this room at the library, I reserved it for a special microphone, which sounds a lot better than the one I'm currently using. The problem is that, let's see here. Oh yeah, the room was very hot. It was 90 degrees Fahrenheit inside that room, and I had to re-record everything I did around halfway into making the video. So if I tend to stumble or just, repeat stuff, at least you understand why. And I'm hoping that this isn't the case when I get to Symphony of the Night. In that, well, with that said, I hope you enjoy the video regardless, and have a great day/night.
Who doesn't love a good beginning to a story? It's always nice to go to a series and just look at how it started. Even if it didn't start all that well, it's always interesting how well a series has evolved over time. In the case of Final Fantasy, I mean, holy crap. Let's start from Final Fantasy's beginning, shall we? It's the mid-80s for Square. Nowadays they're called Square Enix, but back in the day they were just called Square. Nothing was really going well for these guys. Everything they did didn't sell enough to justify making the game. And with so many sale failures, it just seemed like this was going to be their last game. And thus, Final Fantasy was born. And yeah, final is appropriate. This was going to be Square Enix's swan song. So, what better than to go all out for their last title? Now, Final Fantasy originally released on the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Famicom if you're in Japan. Now, it did get a ton of re-releases, including but not limited to the WonderSwan Color, the PlayStation 1, the Game Boy Advance, the PlayStation Portable, and in modern cases, the Pixel Remaster for Steam, consoles, and iPhones. Each subsequent re-release has its own quality of life features that does make it better. And for my pick, I recommend going for the modern day Pixel Remaster. It has lots of quality of life features that the original didn't, as well as having a speed up feature that makes battles go by faster. It is so helpful for grinding and just getting through dungeons, though my only gripe with the Pixel Remaster is the font. What kind of font is this on the Steam version? Ew. It just looks so out of place and just so basic. It's like a Flash game. At least for the console release, you don't have to worry about this ugly ass font. It's automatically fixed. But for the Steam version, it's there regardless. But thankfully, at least in the Steam version, you can edit the font, so it's not nearly as awful looking. All you need to do is just replace a few files and yeah. And some of you might criticize me of being like, hey, you're modifying the game just to make it better for yourself. Well, the only thing this is modifying is the text. And doesn't do anything beyond that. And that's what I'm sticking with. It's purely aesthetic, and that's it. But going back to all the different versions for a bit, just stay away from the NES version. It's pretty outdated compared to today's standards, and it also comes with plenty of bugs. The Thief, for instance, has a special ability where running away is much easier. This, however, is bugged in the NES original, so -1 point to the Thief. With that said, let's get on with it. What better way to talk about the original Final Fantasy than to just dive right in? The four elements in the world have thrown the world into chaos. The earth rots and decays, wildfires spread across the land, the water floods continents, and tornadoes destroy countless. It's said that under these conditions, 4 warriors of light will emerge and begin to save the world. And just like that, here we are. Who knew? Your first task as a warrior of light, or I should say, warriors of light, is to reclaim Princess Sarah. Garland has kidnapped Princess Sarah and has taken her to the Chaos Shrine. Why he do it? Well, that's not explained until Stranger in Paradise, so I need a reason. Garland was handed the pink slip by the king, and wasn't very thrilled about that, to say the least. But very quickly, and easily I should mention, your heroes will take down Garland lickety-split. and the king rewards you by opening the bridge to the rest of the world. From there, the true journey begins, with this awesome opening screen. God, I love this. From here, your main goal is to restore the elements to their proper glory. To do this, all you need to do is destroy that element's archfiend. There's 4 of them in total, each one representing a different element. Lich, the archfiend of earth, Merilith, the archfiend of fire, Kraken, the archfiend of water, and Tiamat, the archfiend of wind. Once the crystals are restored, you're sent back in time 2,000 years into the past in order to save the world from chaos. And there we meet someone we've met before, Garland. Okay, so plot twist time. It turns out we did defeat Garland in our time, but just before he died, he released the 4 archfiends into the universe, and those same archfiends sent him back in time in order to awaken the archfiends from, well, ancient times. But with some newfound power, he becomes the new Chaos, which is bad news for us because he's now super powerful and a massive threat. But this is also good news for us because by defeating Garland, we essentially shatter the time loop. We slay Garland, we go back to our time, but yeah, that's it. That's the game. We save the universe, let's go home. And let's also watch the slowest text scroll ever. You cannot skip it. Final Fantasy I's pretty simple. There's not a lot to the story, but then again, it is an NES game, so I can't really criticize it too much. A lot of games around this time told you the story before the game even began, so a game telling you the story with characters and whatnot is a massive change. You know what else is a bit of a change? World building. World building is told to you by different NPCs you can encounter through the universe. It doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but it's nice fun facts that do make it interesting. And I also like certain moments in the game, like how you can talk to bats after you get the Rosetta Stone. When you talk to bats beforehand, they just say bad things. Once you get the Rosetta Stone and take it to this person, you can then speak to them. I didn't really speak to bats before or after this, but hey, that's pretty cool. Overall, Final Fantasy I's story is simple, but I think it's kind of nice. It's pretty harmless, honestly. It's nothing too offensive, but it's also nothing super massive like we see in later games. Like, for instance, characters in this game don't really interact with anything, like, at all. All the characterization they have is the names they're given at the start of the game, and that's it. No NPCs interacting with characters, no characters' backstories being unveiled to us, no big moments of the characters overcoming the villain. It's pretty simple. I always kind of liked how this game looked and sounded. Even as an NES game, I think the graphics aren't too bad. But later re-releases, especially the Pixel Remaster and the PSP version, take the NES graphics and just make it so much prettier. The PSP version has some very detailed graphics, while the Pixel Remaster is a bit of a jack of all trades, taking all the different ports of Final Fantasy I and making them into a smoothie that I think looks great. I think bosses and enemies look cool in this game. Yeah, this game does include the reskinned enemies, which is basically like, oh god, this one enemy I defeated 3 minutes ago is now blue. Whatever will I do? It's dead now. Honestly though, I do like how this game looks and sounds, even today, and especially the Pixel Remaster. And holy shit, the Pixel Remaster's soundtrack. Wow. Okay, so the NES version, I think, had a pretty good soundtrack. It's very solid, very catchy, and you know what? Very simple. I especially love the battle themes in that game. Battle theme in the original NES version. There was only one battle theme in the original game, which got changed in later releases, of course. The Pixel Remaster orchestrates the original soundtrack, and oh, it's so gorgeous. You have to take a listen for yourself. I especially love the town theme and the shop theme, but the battle theme is something I'll never really get tired of. But now I know what some of you are thinking. What the hell is Final Fantasy and how the hell does it play? Well, Final Fantasy is a role-playing game. You go around the world, search for clues how to progress, and take on enemies when they appear in random encounters in the overworld and dungeons. Before that though, you have your choice on how to begin the game. You have 4 characters, each of whom can be a different name, but they also have to have a different starting job. More on jobs a bit later, but all this really means is that you choose how you want to play the game. And from the moment you boot up the game, you can't switch jobs, so you're gonna have to pick. Once you get into combat with an enemy, the game will flash, and you'll immediately be thrown into a battle. Here, it's you on one side and the enemy on the other. In order to win, you're gonna have to beat up the enemy before they beat up you. Each turn, you can decide what everyone gets to do. Either attack, cast some spells if they're able to, use some items, defend, or simply try to run away. Attack deals damage to enemies as well as magic, and items allow you to use any items that you've accumulated, as long as you can use it in battle. Defend reduces the damage you take, while run away isn't guaranteed running away from encounters, but it is at least a chance to escape the battle if the enemy is scarier than you, or you just don't feel like fighting that enemy. The battle continues until either you kill the enemy kills you, or you run away from the fight. Throughout your adventures, you'll encounter a multitude of enemies. You'll encounter enemies like pirates, bandits, trolls, sorcerers that look like Cthulhu. What the hell? You're gonna need to stay well equipped for these enemies and also defeat them. Now, when you do defeat them, you'll gain some experience. Gain enough experience, and a character will level up, becoming stronger and becoming better at what they already do. The more you explore, the more you fight, the stronger you'll be. And this is a cool thing about RPGs. Yeah, you'll start off pretty weak and not really knowing a lot, but as you progress through the game, you'll slowly become stronger and just more versatile at everything. Enemies also have different strategies. A lot of them early on will just do physical attacks, but some of them, especially later on in the game, can cast some spells or inflict status conditions on your heroes. So you can vary your tactics depending on what the hell happens, what enemies you need to take out, and how you're going to do it. But your characters aren't complete wimps. Each one has different powers depending on what job they picked at the start of the game. There's 6 in total. Each character gets to pick one and only one, but note that you can only bring a maximum of 4 different jobs to the game. And like I said, once you pick one, you can't switch. The first job is the Knight, and they're deal a beating, take a beating. They're very simple and straight to the point. The only gripe I have with the Warrior class is that early on they can be a bit pricey to invest into, but this becomes a non-issue later on when they eventually gain new armor from chests and side quests. Eventually they evolve into the Knight, and they become even better. I mean, yeah, they get access to white magic, but you're not going to use white magic on a Knight. You're going to use big damage on Knight. The Thief is up next, and like I explained earlier, their main mechanic is that they can run from battles easier. Aside from that, they're very fast on their feet. They can deal some extra damage because of their swift movement, and dodging it with them is much easier. The only problem is that if they take some damage, they're going to be a little bit worse for wear. When they evolve into the Ninja, they kick even more ass. Not as much as the Warrior, but they still deal some beatings, and they can use black magic to help support the team. The Monk is up next, and oh boy, does this job kick butt. First off, they don't need any armor equipment. Okay, well, you should give some equipment to them, but the more equipment you give them, the more they slow down. So, don't give them any, but honestly, other from that, they kick so much ass. Like, they deal so much damage from physical attacks, and they don't even need to use any weapons. All they need is their bare fists. If you want to save some money, bring a monk. You won't regret it. The only downside of this job is that they don't use magic at all, especially when they promote into the black belt. But I mean, at that point, they don't even need it, because the black belt just deals big punch damage. Not as much as the Warrior, but they're still really, really good. Do not sleep on a monk. Next up is the Black Mage, and they do not deal physical damage well, and they take damage like, but I don't know, tinfoil? Whatever. The point is, they're pretty glass, but they make up for this with their powerful magic spells. Their magic spells can be used to target enemy weaknesses, and also deal magical damage, which a lot of enemies are weak to. If you know an enemy's magical weakness, you can deal some extra damage with these guys. They can also help out with dealing some extra damage with moves like Temper or Saber. Next up is the White Mage. I mean, you don't bring a White Mage to deal big number go burr. No! Instead, the White Mage specializes in white magic, allowing you to support the team. Rather than deal, like I said, big number go burr, they instead heal the party with a multitude of different healing spells. Oh sure, the White Mage has some offensive spells, but aside from Holy, which you don't get until late game, they're pretty situational. Instead, their main power comes from Cure Magic and Heal Magic, especially Cure, and the higher levels of it. And last but certainly not least, is the Red Mage. This is a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none type job. They can do just about everything, but not as well as some of the other jobs. They can deal physical attacks pretty well, but not as well as the warrior. They can cast black and white magic, just like the black and white mage respectfully, but they're not as good at it. That said though, don't sleep on these guys. If you don't know what the last job should be in your party, go for a red mage. They're pretty versatile and can fit the situation pretty well. When any of these guys evolve, they become black, white, and red wizards. And what they can do, they get even better at. The Black Wizard gets even more powerful black magic spells and does black magic spells even better. The White Wizard just heals for even more and can learn even better skills like Full Life and Holy. And the Red Wizard just gets better at everything. More physical damage, more black damage, more white damage. For my playthrough, since this was my first time, you know what? I like casting. I like magic. I like seeing big number go burr with explosion attack, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. I like magic. Let's go with an entire team of mages. This was a mistake. Okay, so let's calm down here. I decide, for my party, I should bring Light the Warrior, Lamp the Red Mage, Fade the White Mage, and Nuke the Black Mage. Very fitting names, honestly. But I ended up realizing this was a mistake pretty early on because my warrior ended up just dealing a bunch of big physical damage, as well as my red mage. My black mage wasn't really doing much, and my red mage wasn't doing much better. This is because of the different types of attacks, such as physical attacks and magic attacks. Magic attacks require that you learn the corresponding spell from a shop in regular towns, whereas physical attacks you can do from the get-go. You want to punch an enemy in the face right from the get-go? You go for it, man. But then comes magical attacks, and this is where it starts to get a little complicated. Especially now that this game introduces something called spell charges. You ever played Dungeons & Dragons? This is Dungeons & Dragons. You haven't played Dungeons & Dragons? Oh boy. So, in this game, there's 8 different tiers of magic. Each one has a certain number of spell charges, which increases the more powerful a caster is. The more spell charges you have of that tier, the more you can cast that. If you're out of spell charges for a tier, you can't use spells for that specific tier. If you're at a tier 1 magic, sorry, can't cast cure magic anymore now, can ya? Which leads me to my second problem. During dungeons, your resources are gonna have to be used pretty quickly if you want to keep your entire team alive, which can be pretty hard to do, especially when your entire team of casters. Again, do not use a full team of casters if you're not on your first playthrough. Do not do what I did. But other than that, you'll start to realize that spell charges start to expire pretty quickly. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can run out of spell charges before you even realize it. Now, spell charges running out aren't too much of a problem right away, but then comes tier 5 magic, and this is where it starts to get a little funky, because there are a few specific good spells in there. You got Curaga, which is a very powerful healing spell. You got Healora, which is a weaker version of Curaga, but it heals the entire party rather than just one party member, albeit weaker. And finally, you have Life, which restores a party member should they fall in battle. And also Dia 3, but no one cares about Dia 3. The problem with these is that if a party member falls, you have to use the life spell to get them back up if you don't want to use a Phoenix Down or go back to a church. But if you do that, you'll suddenly have less healing bullets for your entire party. And this is where the spell charge system starts to kind of fall, in my opinion. It's just not good for casters, and especially with physical attackers, they don't have to rely on this, and they can just go gung-ho. As such, I quickly realized that physical attacks were just better overall. That is, until I eventually found some items that can be used to cast some spells for free, I might add. Like for instance, what is it? The Wizard Staff? You can cast Fire with this, which is a fire spell that hits the entire enemy party. And, like I said, it's for free. So I just ended up having my Black Mage cast this all the damn time, only upgrading it when I found a better spell to use. And that's basically took care of enemies on the second half of my playthrough. I had my Warrior deal physical damage, Mage also deal physical damage, my White Mage cure using the healing staff, and my Black Mage just used the highest level of spell item he had. But then comes dungeons, and this is where the game starts to get a bit weird with its difficulty. Final Fantasy I is a pretty easy game, especially if you're playing the Pixel Remaster. It's not a very hard game, but it's just questionably designed. I can only be so hard on this because it's, the first entry of the Final Fantasy series. But, what were they thinking? Okay, so enemies in this game can give you a bit of run for your money, especially early on. Especially in cases like the Marsh Cave, this dungeon just loves poisoning you. And when that happens, your allies take damage every few turns. Combine this with the high encounter rate and, yikes. Now here's the thing. At the end of these dungeons, usually, come bosses. And they are designed to give you a run for your money, even more so than enemies. But I just question what and why, and it's just pretty bad when I go up to a boss and within a few turns they're dead. When you're not in combat, you can explore the world and figure out what your next destination is. Yeah, your end goal is to restore the world's 4 crystals and elements, but you're gonna need to figure out how to get there and what you need to do in order to reach there. This is where the exploration part of the game comes in. Throughout the game's many towns, you can talk to various NPCs who will tell you about fun facts about the world, but some of them will also give you hints on where you need to go. Matter of fact, the game is honestly pretty well designed for exploration and figuring out what you need to do. Assuming you're talking to NPCs, of course, you shouldn't really find yourself lost and confused about what you need to do. Well, okay, I did have to use a guide at certain parts of the game, but this was only because I got confused. I think that Final Fantasy I, even today, honestly, is pretty well designed in telling you what you can do and what you can't. The first part of the game, where you get a pirate ship, you still can't leave the area unless you do a specific part of the main story, which is honestly really good in breaking the player in. And once you do leave this part, the world opens more. Yeah, it can be a bit intimidating, but as long as you write down what NPCs say and telling you where it does what, where is what, and what specific relics you need to look for, you should never really find yourself lost. There are a few moments I don't like for instance this canoe maze, which can just honestly go bleh, and just going around with a mystic key trying to figure out what goes to where, even if I do kind of like unlocking things after I got the mystic key itself. While in towns, you can of course talk to NPCs, but you can also prepare yourself for the battles ahead. You can purchase some armor and weapons from the armory and blacksmith respectively, and you can also purchase spells, which you can give to your certain party members. You can also stay in an inn to restore your party's spell charges and HP, as well as go to a church in case one of your party members died. You can revive them for a good chunk of money. It also just helps that Final Fantasy I isn't too long. I beat this game in about 12 hours, which is pretty quick for RPG standards. In fact, I thought there was going to be a lot more to this game, honestly, but, I'm kind of satisfied with what I played. Final Fantasy I is pretty basic at the end of the day. It's nothing massive. In fact, it's pretty simplistic. But you know what? I still think it's a pretty good game. And if you're at all interested in checking out any RPGs, or just getting into RPGs in general, I recommend starting with the first Final Fantasy. It's a pretty solid game, and one that's very easy to pick up and play. You know what? I think I could call Final Fantasy I that. Simple, but fun. But with that said, that's all for this video. Stay tuned next time for when I come in blazing with Symphony of the Night. Stay tuned for more, and that's all for now. Peace!